We're here at the Texas Battleship. The Texas Battleship was the last battleship to participate in World War I and World War II. Come on, let's take a look. Join Joe as he chronicles his road trips through the cities, towns, highways, back roads, and various regions of the Lone Star State. This is Texas Chronicles with Joe Perez. My adventure begins in the historic town of LaPorte, Texas, the home of the San Jacinto Battle Monument and Museum, and the Battleship Texas historical site. The monument is another segment. Today we are focusing on the Battleship Texas. Battleship Texas historical site is located at 3523 Independence Parkway in LaPorte, Texas. Welcome to the Battleship Texas. The Battleship Texas is the last remaining battleship that participated in both World War I and World War II. Over her service life, the Navy repeatedly outfitted the ship with cutting-edge technology. The Battleship Texas set sail in 1914. She actually started being built in 1910. When she set sail, none of the aircraft weaponry was on board this vessel. She was built in 1910. 7 years earlier, the Wright brothers flew at Kitty Hawk, and they flew a whopping 123 feet. So when this vessel set sail, no one thought that aircraft could go into the middle of the sea. So therefore, there was no reason why she would have any anti-aircraft weaponry. She was decommissioned in 1948. That means the Navy was done with her. Admiral Nimitz called the governor of Texas and said, "We are done with the battleship. If you want her, you can have her. But you're going to have to pay for her to be towed from Newport News, Virginia to Texas." The governor said, "Forget it." So the school children of Texas started collecting nickels, dimes, quarters to bring the Texas home. They didn't collect enough to do so, but they created so much political pressure that the governor decided to bring the Texas home. And that's how she ended up in the Houston Ship Channel. Today, Battleship Texas is a floating museum and the last remaining U.S. battleship of her kind. The Texas is 573 feet long, which is not big by today's standards, but she's still a big vessel. If you were to take the Texas and stand her up, it would be 3 feet taller than the San Jacinto Monument. Speaking of the monument is an exact duplication of the Washington Monument in Washington, D.C. But being that we live in the greatest state in the U.S., we weren't going to let the Washington Monument be bigger than ours. So we built a duplicate exactly like the Washington Monument, then added a star on top, just so it could be taller. That's Texas.
The Battleship Texas was in 2 world wars, and she was only hit twice. One round fell short and burst in through the bulkhead on the port side into the half deck, but never exploded. Unfortunately, the other one did explode and killed the one and only sailor ever to die aboard this battleship due to combat, a young man named Chris Christensen. He was the helmsman, or the guy that steered the ship. Standing 10 feet away from Chris was another sailor by the name of Emil Saul. Aim is a wonderful individual. He was blown up at Cherbourg. He was brought back to Newport News, Virginia by ship. He was in the hospital for 3 weeks before he ever woke up. Aim is a remarkable individual. He no longer has any feet. He has his stubs fit inside these special made boots, and he looks like any other 90-year-old man walking with a cane, except for one distinguishing difference. He's got the complexion of a 30-year-old. And I asked Aim, I said, "Aim, how did you stay so young looking?" He said, "John, if you had to have as many plastic surgeries done to your face I had done to mine, you would look young too." That's just the type of attitude that he has. He's a wonderful individual. He was in the hospital for 3 months. He's still in a full body cast. Up his legs, up his torso, up his neck, out both arms. The man barely can blink. Some Marines came into the hospital that had been injured, and when they found out what happened to Aim, they decided that Aim needed a beer. But now, being Marines, they didn't go out and get a beer and bring it back. No. They stole a man that could barely blink out of the hospital, put him in the back of a Jeep, took him down to the local honky-tonk, tried to get him in the door, and his arms being in cast hit the jams and he come to a halt. So they backed him up, turned him sideways, and shuffled him through. They laid him out on 2 tables and brought him a beer with a straw. Aim told me to this day that's the best beer he's ever had in his entire life. In 1925, the Battleship Texas came into dry dock. She had to be upgraded. She no longer can compete with modern naval warfare. So they did several things. Number 1, they added anti-aircraft weaponry. Number 2, They had to contend with enemy submarines, so they added what we call torpedo blisters. You have your original hull. 3 feet away they built another steel hull, and the principle was that the torpedo would hit that hull, explode, but never damage your original bulkhead. But this is when they found out that Texas has got a huge flaw. And that flaw is these big 14-inch guns can only elevate 14 degrees in the air, as high as they can go. Why? Because in 1914, it allowed them to shoot a shell about the same weight as a Volkswagen 13 miles in the air, which is about where the horizon is. There was no point in shooting over the horizon because you couldn't see over the horizon, nor in their wildest imagination did they ever think that man would have that ability. Well, now it's 1925. We got enemy shore emplacements that can shoot 25 miles. So the captain says, wait a minute, I'm not going to get close to that shore until I know what's over the horizon. So how's he going to do that? Well, what they did is they put an aircraft on top of turret number 3. Now, to launch the aircraft, the captain would have to get the ship going as fast as he could, about 25 miles an hour. The pilot would get in the plane, they would turn the turret in the wind, the pilot would get his prop going just as fast as he get it going. They would wait for the ship to list or lean so the aircraft nose was pointed towards the sky, and then a black powder charge would explode and launch the plane into the air sometimes. If he made it, he could radio back to captain and say, hold it, captain, I got an enemy shore emplacement. Well, what good did it do us? I done told you couldn't shoot but 13 miles, didn't I? Well, that didn't stop Captain Baker. If Captain Baker wanted to shoot over the horizon on the starboard side, he flooded his torpedo blisters on the port side and made his ship list or lean like this, made his barrels go higher. So now he's got the ability to shoot over the horizon, but he can't see what he's shooting at. But his pilot can. His pilot says, sir, adjust your fire. 300 yards to the east, 200 yards to the south. And the pilot would watch the explosions until they finally walked them in and destroyed the enemy emplacement. This ship is part of history. It's the best way to put it, it belonged to the world's greatest generation. She is the last dreadnought in the world. A dreadnought is a battleship built between 1912 and 1922, modeled after the British battleship, the HMS Dreadnought. This is a part of history that we can't forget. What is the plaque on the walls of Munich? Those who forget history are doomed to repeat it. She's a symbol of history. She's a symbol of the great American attitude. Stop and think about what these guys went through, the hardships they went through. The Battleship Texas was bracketed 51 times at Normandy. Now what that means is that one shell hit to the right side of the ship, one shell hit to the left side of the ship. This happened 51 times. Now we know today she lived through it, but imagine being a sailor aboard this vessel and seeing those shells hit so close and you didn't know that you were going to live through it. It just goes to the core of how great those guys were back at that time. We're asking for your support for the Battleship Texas. We need funds to keep her afloat. Right now she's in desperately poor condition. There's portions of this ship that you can literally take your finger and punch a hole in the steel. You see, seawater and steel do not mix. She desperately needs to be dry docked. Right now, she's in such bad shape, we can't dry dock her because she would collapse under her own weight if we tried to lift her out of the water. We just spent a number of funds to replace the steel structures under the engines. We need a lot more money to replace the steel structures all the way up to the bow, so she will be strong enough to dry dock. At that point, we need to replace the deck. There's so many things involved on the dry docking portion that it cost another $50 million during the dry dock procedure to preserve this legacy, to preserve the memories of the men who fought and died on this vessel, the men who gave so much for our country. I'm asking you if you can support this battleship, please do so. Thank you very much.